I never believed in things like witchcraft or dark powers, but that all changed the day I saw the pastor do something that still haunts me. It was during a Sunday service at the church, a small place on the edge of town. The pastor, Pastor Kwame, was known for his big miracles, healing the sick and bringing hope to people who had lost it all. But that day, something felt wrong. It started with a man who had been sick for weeks. His skin was pale, and he couldn't even walk without help. Pastor Kwame called him up in front of everyone. He laid his hands on the man's head and prayed loudly, his voice shaking the room. People around me were whispering, their faces full of hope. But then something strange happened. I felt a cold breeze, even though the air was still. It was like the temperature dropped in an instant. The pastor's eyes turned black. I don't mean his pupils. I mean his whole eyes, black like the night, and I felt a chill run down my spine. For a moment, I thought I imagined it. But then, as I looked closer, the man who was sick stood up. He wasn't walking anymore, he was running, laughing, like he had never been sick. Everyone clapped, cheering, but I couldn't move. My heart raced. I couldn't understand what had just happened. It didn't feel right. Later, I overheard some of the church members talking. They said Pastor Kwame wasn't just praying, he was using dark powers to do his miracles. But I didn't believe them, not until I saw it again. The next Sunday, a woman who had been in a car accident came to the front for healing. Her legs were twisted, and she couldn't even stand up. When Pastor Kwame touched her, the room filled with a strange smell. Like burning leaves. Again, his eyes turned black, and she stood up, walking perfectly, as though nothing had ever happened. But the room felt heavier this time, like something evil had entered with the miracle. The whispers grew louder. Some people were scared, but most were too blinded by the pastor's power to see it. I tried to stay away from him, but something about him seemed to pull people in. The church filled up more and more every week, and I started feeling something dark lurking behind the miracles. Then, one day, I saw something I couldn't forget. I went to the church early, hoping to catch the pastor before the service started. I wanted to know the truth. When I walked in, the lights were low, and I saw Pastor Kwame standing by the altar. He was holding something in his hands, something that looked like a small, dark stone. He was speaking in a language I didn't understand, his voice low and deep. Then, as I watched, I saw shadows moving around him. It wasn't just the light. The shadows were moving of their own accord, like they were alive. I was frozen, but I couldn't look away. The shadows wrapped around him, and I could feel the air grow heavier, like something was about to happen. I wanted to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. I could feel the dark power growing stronger in that room. Suddenly, he stopped. The shadows disappeared, and the air went still again. Pastor Kwame smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was like he knew something I didn't, something terrible. And that was the moment I knew, whatever miracles he was doing, they weren't from God. I left that day and never went back to the church. But I still hear the stories. People say he's still healing the sick, still performing miracles. But now, I wonder how many more are being drawn into the darkness with every miracle. I can't shake the feeling that something is waiting for me if I ever go back. A few weeks later, I couldn't shake the thought of Pastor Kwame. I tried to forget, but the more I tried, the stronger the feeling became. It wasn't just my mind playing tricks, something had changed in the town. People who used to be normal, who used to smile and wave at me on the street, were now distant, colder. I heard about one family who had gone to him for help. Their daughter had been in a coma for months. They told everyone she was healed after Pastor Kwame laid his hands on her. The family was so thankful, and the whole town celebrated. But there was something off. The girl didn't act like herself. She smiled, yes, but it was like her smile didn't reach her eyes. People started whispering that she had changed, that she wasn't the same girl anymore. One night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the people whose lives had turned upside down since the pastor arrived. I decided to go back. Not to the service, but to the church itself. Something in me needed to know what was really happening behind those closed doors. When I arrived, the church was dark, just like last time. But this time, the door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, then pushed it open. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it, the cold air again, just like when I first saw him perform those miracles. But this time, there was something more, something darker. I could hear faint chanting coming from the altar. I slowly crept closer, staying in the shadows, careful not to make a sound. I could see Pastor Kwame, standing by the altar with his back turned to me. His hands were raised high, and I saw the dark stone again. The one I had seen before. It was glowing, a strange red light coming from it. The chanting grew louder. I couldn't understand the words, but the air seemed to thicken, like something was waking up, something angry. Then, I saw it. A shape moving behind him, twisting in the shadows. At first, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but as it grew clearer, I realized it was not human. It was tall, with long arms that stretched too far for any person to have. Its eyes were red, and it was looking directly at me. I froze. I couldn't breathe. The shape reached out its hand, pointing straight at me. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs were glued to the floor. Pastor Kwame turned around slowly. His eyes were black again, and his smile stretched wide across his face, too wide. "You should not have come," he said, his voice deep and cold. That was when I saw it, he wasn't alone anymore. The dark creature behind him had stepped forward, and I realized it wasn't just a shadow. It was real, and it was here for me. "I've been waiting for you," Pastor Kwame said. "You've seen too much." The last thing I remember before I ran out of that church was the sound of his voice echoing in my head, saying, "There's no escaping what I've already claimed." I don't know what that means, but I don't care to find out. I haven't been back since, but every night, when I try to sleep, I can still hear the chanting. I can still see those red eyes. I don't know how much longer I can hide from the darkness that Pastor Kwame controls. I haven't been back to that town since that night. The memories are still fresh in my mind, like a shadow I can't escape. The people I once knew, they've either changed or disappeared altogether. I've heard rumors that the church has grown even bigger, that more people keep flocking to Pastor Kwame for his miracles, but I stay away. What happened to me wasn't just about seeing something dark, it was about realizing how easy it is to be blinded by hope. People wanted so badly to believe that something good could happen to them that they ignored the signs. They didn't see the price they were paying for those miracles. I learned the hard way that not everything that glitters is gold, and not every miracle comes from a place of light. Some come from a much darker place. I've come to understand that sometimes, we chase after answers so desperately that we lose sight of the truth. We let ourselves be led by promises that seem too good to be true, and in the end, it costs us more than we can ever imagine. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: always trust your instincts, even when it's hard. If something doesn't feel right, walk away, no matter how tempting it is to stay. Some paths are better left untraveled.